The NES is Nintendo's first console. With it, we got pretty low graphics, but some decent pixel art for the time. Some games now like Undertale were inspired by its art in RPGs. Also, back then, it sold incredibly well, and a lot of its games have incredible culture around it with speedrunning, and also just people playing it just for the nostalgic value. Collectors will spend tons of money just to get a single game that's probably ass, but yet people still do it. All in all, it comes down to the rarity. Since it's old, it obviously can have less, and then that causes values. But we're not going to talk about that. You see, with any system, if it has good sales, it's gonna make another type. Like how the PlayStation had the PS2 and PS3, and we even got a PS5 out now. So, Nintendo's response to the NES would be the SNES. The SNES had amazing pixel art. That's just the first thing I want to say. We have to take this in comparison, okay? The NES only had 52 colors for it, okay? 52 to 55, really. The SNES would take that palette from a maximum of 55 colors to 256. And true, the SNES didn't have the best graphics, but I can guarantee you that, well, the pixel art really held up. Now, you would think that with only 256 colors able to be used, you'd think that would be a pretty big limiting factor for game developers at that time. But with the games we got then, you'd be incredibly wrong with that statement. This is the original Mario from Super Mario Bros. For the NES. The number of colors he has on this, from what I counted, were a grand total of 4. 4 different colors for this one sprite. Now, as I said, there's only 52 to 55 colors allowed on NES at a time, so that means the colors left would be around 48 or 51. So keep in mind that. Now look at this. This is Mario from Super Mario World. This has 10 colors, doubling in the more than doubling in the 4 we got for the original one. And yet, even with the 10 colors, it still looks amazing. And if we look for the backgrounds of these games, we can see a massive quality increase. Not with the graphics per se, but mostly with the pixel art. It looks incredibly amazing, and we can also look at some other games. If we look at Mike Tyson's Punch-Out, we can see that only the main fighters, like Don Flamenco, King Hippo, and Glass Joe, really only have animations when they get hit. Sure, Little Mac, when he gets hit, turns to like this little purple blob and goes to the side, which is where he got hit. And he also has to jump and, throw his punches, but those aren't really emotions, rather those are necessities that the game devs have to make, or else it's just going to look like Little Mac just standing still with reactions from the enemies with the inputs you put, which really wouldn't look good for a Nintendo game. Now, if we look at Super Punch-Out, which I know this game is hated on because of 2 things. Well, one, Little Mac is gone, but also Glass Joe and people like that were also missing. Not only did we get new fighters though, we got entirely new things for the game, specifically with its pixel art and emotions. You see, when we look at Super Punch-Out gameplay, we can see a couple things. One, the ground in the background looks a tiny more detailed with some shading. Also, the fighters' muscles look a little more shaded. But also, everyone is expressive. One, we also see the coaches, talk, which is something we didn't get at Mike Tyson's. But not only do the fighters react, so does the person we're playing as. You see, the thing about this game is, when you get hit, the character you're playing as, I don't know what his name is, so for now we're just going to call him Boxer Norman. When Boxer Norman gets hit, he'll look to the side, whichever one he got hit, kind of like Little Mac in the original Mike Tyson's game. Only this time, instead of turning into a purple blob, he'll actually have an expression of shock and pain. And while it isn't super graphic because it's a Nintendo console and also it's meant for kids, it does get the point across that the punch that got hit to him was pretty hard and it hurt a lot. With that, we can clearly see that the SNES not only was adding on to games we got in the past, it was also making games look incredible, with emotions that the NES could never have dreamed of having. That was a nice trip from the past, but what if we look at the now? When we look here, we can go from the SNES all the way to the Switch. Now, there's a couple things that we notice from this. One, the SNES is added to Nintendo Switch's online program, but also, a lot of the SNES games that were made on the console were brought over to the Switch, not only with the online program, but with sequels. And not only sequels, but trequels, and just numerous different things. You see, games like Super Mario Kart and Donkey Kong Country, which were made on these, were even now have released for the Switch today. We got Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. These games, well, weren't exactly on the SNES. Their franchises started on the SNES, with Donkey Kong Country starting on the SNES, which had some, relatively good pixel art. Not a big fan of Donkey Kong, but it still holds up pretty well. But also Mario Kart, while it again doesn't look the best since everything looks too flat, it still holds up with the gameplay. Mario Kart is one of the best-selling Nintendo franchises back then, even had a bestseller Nintendo Select thing on it, but now it's kind of dying. But we can clearly see that games from the SNES are inspiring the games we get now. Again, like I said before, games like Undertale and Deltarune were both inspired by old games and RPGs. Specifically like Earthbound for a good example, and while Earthbound was an SNES for America, apparently there was NES releases, but I'm pretty sure those were emulated and for Japanese and PAL only, I think. I'm not sure, I just remember seeing that one time, so just kind of basing off memory here. But when we look at these games, they have releases after releases years, and they sell millions of copies too. Games we see everywhere now in the store, a lot of them started on the SNES. There's only two more things I want to say, kind of like my last point. And that is simple. The games on the SNES, though the graphics weren't that good, the pixel art definitely held up for it. And two, the SNES did something most companies can't do. It turned its limits into strengths. It took the 256 palette that was originally made and made some of the greatest games that are even being made to this day. Punch-Out's last release was Punch-Out Wii. Mario Kart got a DLC, I think it was this year or late 2022. And we've got Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze for the Switch, which has been around for a while, but I do remember playing that. It's a pretty fun challenge. Well, I wouldn't say challenge, I don't know. It looks pretty cool, okay? It looks cool. But you can clearly see that the SNES has definitely been inspiring the era we're in now. The games that we get, they're still being recognized for being something incredible at the time. The SNES, again, is known mostly for its games, but it shines with its pixel art. Having only a palette of 256, it's clear to see why some people thought it was a weak system, and hell, now it definitely is a weak system, don't get me wrong, but it holds up pretty well for what it stands for. And while its lifespan was only 10 years, the games and the art that it left behind are for sure gonna last a lot longer. Hey everyone, this is Miniature here. So, originally I thought this was gonna be like a 5 to 6 minute video. Turns out it's like 9 minutes, so basically on par with all my other videos. This whole thing was kind of an experiment with seeing how much I can edit, and if that will actually work well and better. So as you see, I put some music, I put some gameplay, stuff like that. Nintendo Unity was the one who did the Mike Tyson's Punch-Out one. Zallard one was the one who did the Super Punch-Out. All links them in the description. Go check them out. It was a pretty cool video Zallard made. I don't know nothing about speedrunning, but it looks pretty cool. And then Mike Tyson's Punch Out a cool game, so go check out Nintendo Unity because he did it like a pro. Yeah, that's really about it. Hope you guys have a good day. Bye.